Howdy, y'all. So I've been working on more videos. Well, I've been working on one video, and I want it to be the first fully scripted video that I've done, and try to maybe do some things where it's less me on screen and more, oh, hi, dog. You want to say hi? Come here. Come up here. Come here. Come up. There's a Ramby boy. Oh, he's sniffing the mic. That probably sounds pretty weird. Oh boy, he wanted to be in the video. He said, "That's my good side." Anyway, I'm working on that, but it's taking a long time. And I figured in these weird times where we're all home and maybe bored, I'm not really bored yet, but some people might be, I would start doing another idea that I've had, which is based on First Chapter Fridays, which is sometimes used in teaching. Basically, some English teachers use it as a way to introduce new books to their students without forcing them to read the whole thing or having it be like a really intensive experience. So on Fridays, it would be First Chapter Friday, and the teacher would read out loud to the students the first chapter from a book that the students might be interested in. Oh, there's going to be yep, he's playing with his ball with treats in it. Clearly a more casual video recording experience today. Anyway, some teachers might make it a little more intensive or high stakes by having students analyze the first chapter of something and do some more sort of literary analysis work with it, but still with the idea that we're just looking at the first chapter of something and it's Friday. So I wanted to turn that idea into having First Chapter Fridays on my video channel as a way to share books that they might be my favorites, they might be notable to me, meaningful to me, things that I feel like many people don't know about or haven't read. So not necessarily my all-time top whatever, but just books that I feel other people might be interested in. And even though it's not Friday, I figured I would start doing this now because it will keep me busy. Maybe it'll keep you busy, introduce you to some new books you might read while you're staying home. I'm foreseeing myself reading the first chapter and potentially interrupting now and then to talk a little bit about what I like or how something ties into later on in the book. Nothing spoilers wise, but I guess what I'm trying to say is it will not necessarily be me just reading the chapter without any additional commentary. So if that's going to bother you, I completely understand, and maybe you can just make a note of the book that I mentioned and check it out for yourself. I don't think I'm going to edit these videos at all because I just want to get them up there, throw them onto the web for you. So on that note, I've had a stack of books sitting on my desk for a long time that I had in mind for this project. So I'm kind of just picking up the first one off the stack, which is helpful to me as well, because part of what was taking me so long to do this is that I'm like, oh, which book should I start with? Is this really a good one to do? What should I say? Should I have some more analysis to say about it? So instead, I'm just forcing myself to pick up the freaking book and read. So the top of the pile is the Scorpio Races by Maggie Stiefvater. I'm also not doing research and learning how to pronounce things correctly, so sorry. Just a little mention as to why this book is in this pile. I love it. It's amazing. I really want more people to read it. It's technically a young adult book, but if you are not into young adult, don't let that scare you off, because to be honest, I'm not super into young adult books most of the time. I sometimes find the plots a little surface level, or it's not my thing. For people who it is their thing, that's awesome. But I think this book is a great example of how marketing comes into play with how books are categorized, because in terms of the level of the prose and the world development, it did not read to me like a young adult novel. Again, I might be biased and my perspective on young adult novels is limited, so I'm not trying to diss young adult novels. But I feel like it could have just been like a regular adult book. But when you're a publishing company and you're like, oh, this book's about a teenage girl who rides horses, and there's also sort of like magical horses in it too, and there's another teenage boy that she's kind of like interacting with. I mean, it's like, it has to be a young adult novel. That's the law. If you put all these things in your book, it's a young adult novel. So anyway, I'm actually going to be reading both the prologue and chapter 1. Another, like, this is clearly a young adult novel thing, is that it alternates perspectives, which I can kind of get tired of in books. It's not always my favorite thing, but in this one, I am totally here for it just because I love the world, and I think she does a good job with the characters. So the prologue is going to be from one perspective, and chapter 1 is going to be from another. So, prologue, 9 years earlier, and this is from Sean's perspective. It is the first day of November, and so, today, someone will die. Even under the brightest sun, the frigid autumn sea is all the colors of the night, dark blue and black and brown. I watch the ever-changing patterns in the sand as it's pummeled by countless hooves. They run the horses on the beach, a pale road between the black water and the chalk cliffs. It's never safe, but it's never so dangerous as today, race day. This time of year, I live and breathe the beach. My cheeks feel raw with the wind throwing sand against them. My thighs sting from the friction of the saddle. My arms ache from holding up 2,000 pounds of horse. I've forgotten what it is like to be warm and what a full night's sleep feels like, and what my name sounds like spoken instead of shouted across yards of sand. I am so alive. As I head down to the cliffs with my father, one of the race officials stops me. He says, "Sean Kendrick, you are 10 years old. You haven't discovered it yet, but there are more interesting ways to die than on this beach." My father doubles back and takes the official's upper arm as if the man were a restless horse. They share a brief exchange about age restrictions during the race. My father wins. "If your son is killed," the official says, "the only fault is yours." My father doesn't even answer him, just leads his Weishi stallion away. It's an italicized, like, fantasy word that I've never pronounced out loud before, so sorry. On the way down to the water, we're jostled and pushed by men and by horses. I slide beneath one horse as it rears up, its rider jerked at the end of the lead. Unharmed, I find myself facing the sea, surrounded on all sides by the Kapal Yuishi, the water horses. They are every color of the pebbles on the beach: black, red, golden, white, ivory, gray, blue. Men hang the bridles with red tassels and daisies to lessen the danger of the dark November sea, but I wouldn't trust a handful of petals to save my life. Last year, a water horse trailing flowers and bells tore a man's arm half from his body. These are not ordinary horses. Drape them with charms, hide them from the sea, but today, on the beach, do not turn your back. Some of the horses have lathered. Froth drips down their lips and chest, looking like sea foam, hiding the teeth that will tear into men later. They are beautiful and deadly, loving us and hating us. My father sends me off to get his saddlecloth and armband from another set of officials. The color of the cloth is meant to allow the spectators far up on the cliffs to identify my father, but in his case, they won't need it, not with his stallion's brilliant red coat. "Ah, Kendrick," the officials say, which is both my father's name and mine. "It'll be a red cloth for him." As I return to my father, I'm hailed by a rider. "Ho, Sean Kendrick." He's diminutive and wiry, his face carved out of rock. "Fine day for it." I'm honored to be greeted like an adult, like I belong here. We nod to each other before he turns back to his horse to finish saddling up. His small racing saddle is hand-tooled, and as he lifts the flap to give the girth a final tug, I see words burned into the leather. "Our dead drink the sea." My heart is jerking in my chest as I hand the cloth to my father. He seems unsettled as well, and I wish I was riding, not him. I wish I were riding, but it's fine. No one uses the subjunctive anymore. Myself I am sure of. The red Weishi stallion is restless and snorting, ears pricked, eager. He is very hot today. He will be fast and difficult to hold. My father gives me the reins so he can saddle the water horse with the red cloth. I lick my teeth, they taste like salt, and watch my father tie the matching armband around his upper arm. Every year I have watched him, and every year he has tied it with a steady hand, but not this year. His fingers are clumsy, and I know he is afraid of the red stallion. I have ridden him, this Kapal. On his back, the wind beating me, the ground jarring me, the sea spraying our legs, we never tire. I lean close to the stallion's ear and trace a counterclockwise circle above his eye as I whisper into his soft ear. Sean, my father snaps, and the Kapal's head jerks up quickly enough that his skull nearly strikes mine. What are you doing with your face next to his today? Does he not look hungry to you? Do you think you'd look fine with half a face? But I just look at the stallion's square pupil, and he looks back, his head turned slightly away from me. I hope he's remembering what I told him. Do not eat my father. My father makes a noise in his throat and says, I think you should go up now. Come here, and he slaps my shoulder before mounting up. He is small and dark on the back of the red stallion. Already, his hands work ceaselessly on the reins to keep the horse in place. The motion twists the bit in the horse's mouth. I watch his head rocking to and fro. It's not how I would have done it, but I'm not up there. I want to tell my father to mind how the stallion spooks to the right, how I think he sees better out of his left eye, but instead I say, see you when it's over. We nod to each other like strangers, the goodbye unpracticed and uncomfortable. I am watching the race from the cliffs when a gray Weeshi horse seizes my father by his arm and then his chest. For one moment, the waves do not attack the shore, and the gulls above us do not flap, and the gritty ear in my lungs doesn't escape. Then the gray water horse tears my father from his uneasy place on the back of the red stallion. The gray cannot keep its ragged grip on my father's chest, and so my father falls to the sand, already ruined before the hooves get to him. He was in second place, so it takes a long minute before the rest of the horses have passed over the top of his body, and I can see it again. By then, he is a long, black and scarlet smear half submerged in the frothy tide. The red stallion circles, halfway to a hungry creature of the sea, but he does as I asked. He does not eat the thing that was my father. Instead, the stallion climbs back into the water. Nothing is as red as the sea that day. I don't think often of on my father's body strung out through the reddening surf. Instead, I remember him as he was before the race, afraid. I won't make that same mistake. So that was prologue. Okay, chapter 1, Puck. That's the perspective for this chapter. People say my brothers would be lost without me, but really, I'd be lost without them. Usually, if you ask someone on the island where they come from, they say something like roundabout Skarmouth, or backside of Thisbe, the hard side, or stone's throw from Thola, but not me. I remember being small, clutching my father's lined hand, and some wind-beaten old farmer who looked like he'd been dug out of the sod asking, "Where you from, girl?" I answered, in a voice too loud for my tiny freckled self, "The Connolly house." He said, "What's that now?" And I replied back, "Where we Connollys live, because I'm one." And then, I am still a bit embarrassed about this part of it, as it speaks to a black part of my character. I added, "And you're not." That's just the way things are. There are Connollys, and then there's the rest of the world. Though the rest of the world, when you live on Thisbe, is not very large. Before last fall, it was always this: me, my younger brother Finn, my older brother Gabe, and our parents. We were a pretty quiet family altogether. Finn was always putting things together and taking them back apart, and saving any spare parts in a box under his bed. Gabe wasn't a huge conversationalist either. 6 years older than me, he saved his energy for growing. He was 6 feet tall by the age of 13. Our dad played the tin whistle when he was home, and our mother performed the miracle of the loaves and fishes every evening, though I didn't realize what a miracle it was until she wasn't around. It wasn't that we were unfriendly with the rest of the island. We were just friendlier with ourselves. Being a Connolly came first. That was the only rule. You could hurt all the feelings you like so long as you weren't hurting the feelings of a Connolly. It's midway through October now. Like all autumn days on the island, it begins cold but warms and gains color as the sun rises. I get a curry comb and a brush and knock the dust out of Dove's dun hide until my fingers warm up. By the time I saddle her up, she's clean and I'm grubby. She is my mare and my best friend, and I keep waiting for something bad to happen to her because I love her too much. As I pull up her girth, Dove pushes her nose into my side, just shy of a nip, and pulls her head back quickly. She loves me, too. I can't ride long. Soon I'll have to come back and help Finn make cookies for the local shops. I also paint teapots for the tourists, and since the races are coming up, I have more than enough orders backed up. After the races, there'll be no more visitors from the mainland until spring. The ocean is just too uncertain a thing when it's cold. Gabe will be out all day working at the Scarmouth Hotel, getting the rooms ready for the race spectators. When you're an orphan on Thisbe, it's hard work making ends meet. I didn't actually realize there wasn't much to the island until a few years ago when I started reading magazines. It doesn't feel it to me, but Thisbe's tiny. 4,000 people on a rocky crag jutting from the sea, hours from the mainland. It's all cliffs and horses and sheep and one-track roads winding past treeless fields to Scarmouth, the largest town on the island. The truth is, until you know any different, the island is enough. Actually, I know different, and it's still enough. Brief pause. Part of what I love so much about this book is the world building. I'm not usually someone who's like, oh, I want to live in this place, or I want to make up a character who exists here. But I love what Maggie does with building up Thisbe and the culture and the beliefs in this book without explaining everything to death. Like in the prologue, they talk about putting charms on the horses, and Sean does that counterclockwise circle on the horse, the water horse. And you find out more in the book that these are sort of ways to calm the horses and minimize their wild nature by putting metal on them or adorning them with metal charms. All stuff like that. And it's very cool to read about, and then also very cool to not have it be here are the rules for putting metal on your horse. This type of metal will produce this effect. So good amount of intriguing world building without over-explaining. Back to the book. So I am up and riding, my toes cold in my scruffy paddock boots, and Finn is sitting in the Morris in the drive, carefully applying black tape to a rip in the passenger seat. The rip was a gift from Puffin, the barn cat. At least Finn has now learned to never leave the windows rolled down. He's pretending to look annoyed at the repairs, but I can tell he is actually cheerful to be doing it. It is against Finn's code to reveal too much happiness. When he sees me riding Dove, Finn gives me a funny look. Once upon a time, before last year, that funny look would have changed into a sly smile, and then he would have gunned the engine, and we would have raced, me on Dove, him in the car, though he was technically too young to drive. A lot too young. It didn't matter, though. Who was going to stop us? So we would race, me through the fields, him on the roads. First to the beach had to make the other's bed for a week. But we haven't raced for nearly a year. Not since my parents died on the boat. I turned Dove away, making little circles in the side yard. She's eager and too brisk to concentrate this morning, and I'm too cold to make her soft and round on the bit. She wants to gallop. I hear the Morris's engine rev. I turn in time to see the car go tearing down the lane, accompanied by a puff of ill-advised exhaust. I hear Finn's whoop a moment later. He pokes his head out the window, face pale under his dusty hair, smiling a grin that shows every tooth he has. Are you waiting for an invitation? He calls. Then he retreats back into the cab and the engine revs high as he shifts gears. Oh, you're on, I tell him, though he is far, far out of earshot. Dove's ears swivel back toward me and then prick toward the road, quivering. It is a wild, cool morning, and she barely needs to be asked. I press my calves into her sides and cluck my tongue. For non-horsey people, when it's really cool and potentially a little breezy outside, horses can be a little frisky. So Dove is raring to go. Okay. I press my calves into her sides and cluck my tongue. Dove leaps into action, hooves digging up half circles of dirt behind her, and we tear after Finn. Finn's path is no mystery. He has to follow the roads, and there's only the main one, heading into Scarmouth past our house. It's not the straightest way, though. It winds around patchwork fields protected by stone walls and hedges. There's no sense following his serpentine progress, marked by a trail of dust. Instead, Dove and I tear across the fields. Dove is not large, none of the natural island horses are, as the grass isn't great, but she's scopy and brave. So she and I throw ourselves over hedgerows at will, so long as the footing's good. We shave off the first corner, spooking several sheep. Sorry, I say to them over my shoulder. The next hedgerow comes up while I'm minding the sheep, and Dove has to twist herself in a hurry to launch herself over. I throw the reins in the world's worst release, but at least keep from jerking on her mouth, and she tucks her legs up tight beneath her and saves us both. As she canters away from the hedge, I gather up the reins again and pat her shoulder to show that I noticed her rescuing us, and she tips her ear back to show that she appreciates that I cared. Then it's sailing across a field that used to hold sheep but now holds scrubby heather waiting to be burned off. The Morris is still a little ahead of us, a dark shape in front of a tower of dust. I'm not worried about his lead. To get a car down to the beach, he'll have to either take the road through town with its sharp right angles and crossing pedestrians, or make a detour around the town, losing several minutes and giving us a good chance to catch up. I hear the Morris hesitate at the roundabout and then zoom toward town. I can take the road around Scarmouth and avoid any more jumping, or I can skirt through the very edge of the town, popping through a few back gardens and risking being seen by Gabe at the hotel. I can already imagine being the first to charge onto the beach. I decide to risk Gabe seeing me. It's been long enough since we did this that the stodgy old ladies can't complain too much about a horse passing through the yards, as long as I don't squash anything useful. Like a squash, perhaps. That's not in the book. That's just me being funny. Come on, Dove, I whisper. She charges across the road and through a break in the hedgerow. Curtis would really approve of how many times hedgerow is being used in this book, because he uses the word hedgerow for, like, anything. Not necessarily just hedgerows. He'll know. He'll laugh. Anyway. Here there are houses looking like they grew out of the rock, and cluttered back gardens full of possessions that have spilled out of the houses, and on the other side of them a stretch of solid stone that no horse should have to canter on. The only way across is to tear through half a dozen yards and past the hotel on the other side. I hope that everyone's busily at work at the piers or in their kitchens. We burst through the gardens, half leaping over wheelbarrows in the first, avoiding a crop of herbs in the second, and getting barked at by an evil terrier in the third. Then, inexplicably, over an old, empty bathtub in the final yard, and we're off down the road to the hotel. Of course, there is Gabe, and he sees me instantly. He's sweeping the walk in front of the hotel with a mighty push broom. The hotel is a forbidding, ivy-covered building behind him, the leaves cut in neat squares to let the sun in the windows with their bright blue sills. The height of the hotel blocks the morning light and casts a deeper blue shadow on the stone walk he sweeps. Gabe looks tall and grown up with his brown jacket stretched across his broad shoulders. His ginger blonde hair creeps down the back of his neck, a little long, but he is still handsome. I feel a sudden surge of fierce pride that he is my brother. He stops what he's doing to lean on the end of the broom and watch me canter by on Dove. "Don't be mad," I shout at him. A smile walks over one side of his face, but not the other. It almost looks like he's actually happy if you've never seen one of his real ones. The sad thing is, I've gotten used to this fake one. I've become willing to wait for the real one to reappear, without realizing I should have been working hard to find it again. Ah, I see. Willing to wait instead of working for it. Okay, that sentence was a little confusing. It's okay, Maggie. We all write weird sentences sometimes. I canter on, urging Dove into a gallop once we're off the walk and back onto the grass. Here the ground is soft and sandy, and begins to slope rapidly, the track becoming narrow between the hills and dunes that lead to the beach. I can't tell if Finn is ahead of me or behind me. I have to draw Dove back down to a trot as the ground grows too steep. Finally, she makes the awkward leap that takes us down to sea level. When we round the final bank, I make a noise of irritation. The Morris is already parked where the grass meets the sand. The scent of exhaust hangs in the air, cupped by the rise of the ground around us. "You're still a good girl," I whisper to Dove. She is out of breath, but she blows out her lips. She considers it a good race. Finn stands half in and half out of the car, the driver's side door standing open, his feet on the running board. One arm rests on the roof and the other on the upper part of the open door. He's looking out toward the sea, but when Dove blows out her breath through her lips again, he looks back at me, shielding his eyes. I can see that his face is worried, so I nudge Dove next to the car. I let out the reins so that she can graze while we stand there, but she doesn't lower her head. Instead, she too turns her gaze toward the ocean, 100 yards ahead of us. "What?" I ask. I have a sick feeling in my stomach. I follow the line of his eyes. I can just see a gray head thrusting its way above the surf, so far away and so close to the color of the tossed ocean that I can almost believe I'm imagining it. But Finn's eyes wouldn't be so large unless he was certain. Sure enough, the head emerges again, and this time I see dark nostrils blow so wide that I glimpsed a tinge of red in them, even from here. The rest of the head follows, and the neck, crimped mane pasted to its skin by salt water, and then the powerful shoulders glistening and damp. The water horse surges from the ocean and gives a mighty leap, as if the final steps over the incoming tide are a huge obstacle to overcome. Finn flinches as the horse gallops down the beach towards us, and I lay a hand on his elbow, though my own heart is thumping in my ears. "Don't move," I whisper. "Don't move, don't move, don't move." I cling to what we've been told over and over, that the water horses love a moving target. They love the chase. I make a list of reasons it won't attack us. We're motionless. We're not near the water. We're next to the Morris, and the water horses despise iron. Sure enough, the water horse gallops past us without pause. I can see Finn swallowing, his Adam's apple bobbing in his skinny neck, and it's so true, it's so hard not to flinch until it's leapt back into the ocean once more. They're here again. This is what happens every fall. My parents didn't follow the races, but I know the shape of the story nonetheless. The closer it gets to November, the more horses the sea spits out. Those islanders who mean to race in future Scorpio races will often go out in great hunting parties to capture the fresh Kapaluishi, which is always dangerous, since the horses are hungry and still sea-mad. And once the new horses emerge, it's a signal to those who are racing in the current year's races to begin training the horses they caught the years before. Horses that have been comparatively docile until the smell of the fall sea begins to call to the magic inside them. During the month of October until the 1st of November, the island becomes a map of safe areas and unsafe areas, because unless you're one of the riders, you don't want to be around when a Kapaluishi goes crazy. Our parents tried hard to shield us from the realities of the Wishi horses, but it was impossible to avoid it. Friends would miss school because an Wishi horse had killed their dog overnight. Dad would have to drive around a ruined carcass on the way to Skarmouth, evidence of where a water horse and a land horse had gotten into a fight. The bells of St. Columba's would ring midday for the funeral of a fisherman caught unaware on the shore. Finn and I don't need to be told how dangerous the horses are. We know. We know it every day. Come on, I say to him. Starting out to sea, his thin arms bracing him upright, he looks very young. Staring out to sea. He looks very young just then, my little brother, though he's really caught in that strange no-man's land between child and man. I feel the sudden urge to protect him from the grief that October is going to bring. But it isn't really the grief of this October I have to worry about. It's that of an October already long gone. Finn doesn't answer, just ducks back down into the Morris and shuts the door without looking at me. It's already a bad day, and that's before Gabe gets home. So that was prologue in chapter 1, and as you might guess from those first couple chapters, it's about the Scorpio race, which is when the scary water horses are raced along the beach and a bunch of tourists come to town, and Puck and her regular horse end up being in that race. I'm not going to say much more because it's pretty exciting and very cool, and like I said, they do a really good job developing, she does a really good job of developing the world, and there's some like romance stuff, but it doesn't make you want to puke or close the book and never open it again. So I really enjoyed it. I think more people should read it. This author also has a bunch of other books. There's like a trilogy, or not related to this work, unfortunately. But I really enjoy her writing. Like I said, I think it is beyond like the typical YA prose style or level. So don't be scared that it's published by Scholastic. Publishers Weekly gave it a starred review, and they called it an utterly compelling read. So just trust it. And New York Times Book Review said it was really good too. So has to be good. Anyway, we did it. I'm really excited. So I'm going to try to do more of these. I don't want to say every day, just because then I'll miss a day and I'll never do it again. But yeah, I have like a nice stack of books. I think I have like 13, 14, 15, 17 different books that I could read first chapters of. So if you're feeling it, come along with me on this first chapter journey, and we can pretend that it's Friday, because first chapter Friday sounds really good, but I'm just going to post them whenever. Anyway, bye.